Welcome to Pacific Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a progressive community housed in a classic modern church. We have a big heart and a scrutinizing mind. We've been a location for progressive religious thought in the South Bay for more than 60 years. We aim to be the church of the open mind and loving heart. All those that pursue truth with a welcoming spirit are welcome here. My name is Tracy Blender, your worship assistant today. We're lucky enough to have the president of the South Coast Interfaith Council here with us today. In these very racially charged times, Dr. Sara Deen, who gave up the practice of dentistry, at least for a while, to pick up the call of the working cross-culturally. Sara is here for a number of reasons today. She will talk about the work of the Interfaith Council. Being a modern Muslim woman, she also has her own experience negotiating the public and private nature of her identity. I am sure she will give us a firsthand experience of the power of alliances between faiths. With Reverend Steve now on the board of the South Coast Interfaith Council, I'm sure this is not the last we will be seeing of Sara. But first, here's a few announcements. At 1 p.m., we have our Zoom call today, continuing on our theme of race. Today at 11, Steve is hosting his Zoom call, and Thursday of this week, we're meeting to talk about the book, The Other Westmore. Please check the website for news. Also, our Social Justice Committee is doing a voting rights postcard event. We need about 12 volunteers to fill out 50 postcards each. Expenses have been covered. Please contact Gabby at admin@pacificunitarian.org or Leanna Hart to volunteer, and they will provide further information. We're going to light our chalice now and say our chalice words. If you have a chalice at home, this is a great time to go ahead and light that. We come together to be a light unto one another and a light unto the world. We are through with despairing of hope and with cursing the darkness. One candle. We light one candle against the gloom of sorrow and despair. May its light awaken within us our own flames so that we may shine forth, offering not hell, but hope to a world in need.
Today I'm going to read a book that's a favorite of mine. It's called From Far Away, and it is actually from far away. It's from Canada. It's written by someone who emigrated to Canada from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, someone who grew up in Quebec, and a little girl who is now a professor at a university who went there from Lebanon. So, without further ado, from far away, and someone's going to help me show you the pictures. This is the little girl. Her name is Sausan Askar. She's 36 right now. She's a professor at a university in Canada. Okay, so Sausan was asked to write to her reading buddy. Dear reading buddy, my teacher suggested that I write to you. I will tell you about myself. My name is Sausan. I am 7 years old and I am in grade 2 now. I came from far away. The place we used to live was very nice, but then a war started. Even where my sister and I slept, there were holes in the wall. Finally, one day, there was a big boom and part of our roof fell in. My father and mother said, there is no food and we are getting shot at. We have to leave. And so, my father left and was gone for a long time. And then a letter came with plane tickets from Canada. I didn't know anything about Canada, but the next day I was on a plane going there. As soon as I got on the plane and the plane moved, I got sick. I stayed sick for the whole trip, which was 2 days long. I didn't like it, and no one wanted to sit near me. Once we got to Canada, my father took me to a school and left me there. After he showed me where the girls' bathroom was, he said, be good and listen to your teacher. So I was good, and I listened to my teacher, only I didn't know what she was saying because she didn't know how to talk right. So I just sat and listened, and children were trying to talk to me, but I was not able to answer them because I didn't speak English. I didn't even speak French. So, when I wanted to go to the washroom, I didn't know how to say, I want to go to the washroom. That's why I used to crawl to the door when the teacher turned her head and looked at the other side of the room. When someone opened the door, I crawled out and went to the washroom. When I came back from the washroom, I waited beside the door, and when someone opened it, I crawled back in and went to my desk, and you could see her crawling on her knees. She didn't want to disrupt anything. But then one day, I crawled to the washroom and saw a Halloween skeleton. Only, I didn't know what Halloween was. I thought the skeleton was evil. I thought that people were going to start shooting each other here, and I screamed a very good scream. Ah! Well, everybody came running from all the classrooms. They thought someone was being killed in the washroom. My teacher opened the washroom door and tried to tell me that it was Halloween and that the skeleton is made of paper. I didn't understand her, and I still didn't know what Halloween was. She jumped up and down and danced around to explain to me that Halloween is just fun. But I thought the skeleton had made her crazy, and I screamed even louder. Then she hugged me to make me feel better. I felt as if my mother was hugging me. I jumped on her lap and pee went down my knees because I was truly scared to death. And that happened so fast, and I felt guilty and ashamed of myself. And I didn't know how to say, I am sorry. But the big tear that rolled down my eye and onto my face said it for me. So, then I went and sat by the front door of the school till my father came for me. I had decided that the whole school was crazy, and I did not want to stay there. When my father came, he told me about Halloween and said that people here are not going to start shooting each other. So I had bad dreams about skeletons for a long time after that. But finally, I began to talk, little by little. I learned enough English to make friends, and school started to be fun. And now I am in grade 2/3, and I am the best reader and speller in class. I read and write a lot of stories. The teacher is now complaining that I never shut up. And there she is, talking. So, that year, when it was Halloween, I wore a mask and we had a party at school. Then I went with my sister trick-or-treating in my neighborhood. We got candy and nobody shot at us the whole time. I decided that Canada is a nice place, and I changed my name from Sausan to Susan. But my mother made me change it back. And there's her mother telling her what it's going to be. So, now, the kindergarten teacher moved from our school, but sometimes when I see her in the mall, I run to her and hug her and wish she was still my teacher. She was my first teacher in senior kindergarten, and she helped me a lot. But she still doesn't let me sit on her lap. Goodbye, Sausan. And this little girl, I don't know if we can scoot in on this, but this little girl had written letters to the writer and illustrator, Robert Munch and Michael Marchenko, about her experience, and they wrote the book together. So I think this has great meaning for us now. Canada, we wish, could be what we're experiencing now, and this is what we strive for in keeping our culture open.
Thank you, Diana. We are going to go ahead and light a candle. This is for all of the unspoken joys and concerns of our community. And now, with no further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Sara Deen.
Good morning. I'm so pleased today to share the following prayer with you all. This prayer was authored by Christian, Jewish, and Muslim clergy and was used in many places of interreligious worship around the time of the Gulf War in 1991. Eternal God, Creator of the universe, there is no God but you. Great and wonderful are your works, wondrous are your ways. Thank you for the many splendored variety of your creation. Thank you for the many ways we affirm your presence and purpose, and the freedom to do so. Forgive our violation of your creation. Forgive our violence towards each other. We stand in awe and gratitude for your persistent love for each and all of your children, Christian, Jew, Muslim, as well as those with other faiths. Grant to all and our leaders attributes of the strong, mutual respect in words and deed, restraint in the exercise of power, and the will for peace with justice for all. Eternal God, Creator of the universe, there is no God but you. Amen. Good morning again, and thank you so much for the generous invitation. I have to tell you, it's very strange to be in this space today. I think I was here almost exactly a year ago when this room was bustling and the tables were full of smiling faces, and so I pray soon, I hope we can meet again in person. There's been a lot of talk recently about identity and privilege. Like many people, I've been trying to figure out, where do I fit in this larger conversation? In terms of my identity, who really am I? And in terms of privilege, how do I relate to other people? As a Muslim American, I do lean on the Quran, the scripture of Muslims, for some guidance. And so I wanted to share a couple of pieces from the Quran which have helped me understand my identity and privilege. When we approach the Quran, Muslims start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One, this is how God introduces him or herself to us at the opening of every section of our book. And I feel that that is how God would like to be known, as merciful and compassionate. And it orients the believer's heart to approach the world through a lens of mercy and compassion. So with that in mind, the first piece I share: remember when your Lord said to the angels, "Behold, I am creating a human being from clay. When I have proportioned this one and breathed into this one of my spirit, fall down in prostration." It is so deeply moving that extraordinary human creations that we are, capable of building beautiful monuments, discovering antibiotics, and all the wondrous things humans are able to do, that we find our origins in clay or in the earth. It's a very important reminder. And yet we are carriers of the divine spirit. Imagine that. Each one of us carries an element or portion of the divine essence. Imagine if we approached every human being in our life with that reverence and that awe, that you, O human in front of me, share the divine essence, the divine spirit. As a Muslim, I believe that humans are unique in their capacity to therefore reflect the divine attributes. What I mean by that is Muslims refer to God by 99 names. There are 99 names that Muslims will use to refer to God, such as most compassionate, most just, most generous. As carriers of the divine spirit, it means we can all reflect these divine attributes, albeit never as perfectly as God. Perfection lies with God alone. But in our own imperfect ways, we can bring that divine presence into the spaces we occupy. Furthermore, the Quran tells me, "O humankind, truly, we created you from a male and a female, and we made you peoples and tribes that you may come to know one another. Surely the most noble of you before God are the most reverent of you. Truly God is knowing, aware." So now here I'm understanding a little bit more about who I am. One, I'm made from clay of the earth that ties me to the dirt and soil that's beneath my feet. And two, that I too, like everyone else that's watching and listening, every other human being, we all come from the same family, from the same primordial couple. And yet, God chose to create us into peoples and tribes. Our diversity is intentional, not incidental. God could have created us as one community. We could have all had the same hair, the same skin, the same way of thinking, the same way of reacting to different situations, and yet God intentionally created us this way. Why would you purposefully create the opportunity for conflict and disagreement? Mentioned also in the Quran, it is written, "And among God's signs are the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations in your tongues and colors. Truly in that are signs for those who know." Again, it's intentional. We're supposed to know something from this diversity. What does it mean to know one another? That first passage insisted that God created us in our diversity so we can know one another. According to Google, and I am told by my children that Google is always correct, they don't need dictionaries anymore. To know means to be aware of through observation, inquiry, or information, and to have developed a friendship with someone through meeting and spending time with them. The Arabic word that the Quran uses here is ta'arafu, and it doesn't mean just knowing one person. It means really being familiar with the experiences of other people. What do I mean by that? It means understanding people that are different from you in a more meaningful way. So knowing one Muslim person does not really mean you understand the experience of being Muslim. Knowing one black person, having one black friend, doesn't mean you understand the experience of being black. And as many of us know, you can still be Islamophobic and have a Muslim friend. You can still express racist ideologies or bias despite having a black friend or family member. So ta'arafu here, the book is calling us to really meaningfully know and understand the experience of other people. So let's go back to the question, but why? Why? Well, if we really believe that each one of us is a reflection of the divine essence, then it would follow that only by knowing one another we can begin to understand and know God. The more little pieces of God's reflection we collect and connect with, the better we might understand the greater picture of where we come from or who we could be. It's also to better know ourselves. It's only through interactions with different types of people that we begin to discover different parts of our own personality, our own essence. That's how we better get to know ourselves. That's why it's so important to understand identity. What about privilege? So the Quran, for a Muslim like myself, I believe the Quran was God's word revealed through Angel Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad. It was revealed over 22 years, and it can be seen as an ongoing conversation between God and this human being, Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him. And so Muhammad was experiencing certain things in his society. He was running into certain troubles. He was upset by the circumstances of his community. And so God is talking to him over 22 years. He's responding to the circumstances that Muhammad is finding himself in. From reading the Quran, we can understand that Muhammad's society was not defined by race, unlike the country we live in today. Instead of race, it was socioeconomic and societal class. That was the impenetrable barrier. So for example, Muhammad was not wealthy, but he was born into a noble class. And that was something that was immutable. Just like we know from living in the Western world, we have the one-drop rule, right? A tiny bit, even one ancestor that's black makes a person black. Our class system that's divided by race is impenetrable. You cannot move from one race class to another. So understanding that that's the perspective that the Quran comes from. The Quran addresses privilege by addressing the rich and the wealthy. And so the Quran says, when it is said unto them, the unaware, the heedless, spend of that wherewith God has provided you. Those who disbelieve say to those who believe, are we to feed one to whom, if God willed, God would feed them? You're not but in manifest error. So essentially the wealthy, who were very comfortable in their privilege, were saying, hey, if God wanted them to be able to eat, he would have fed them. If he wanted them to have wealth, he would have bequeathed to them wealth. It has nothing to do with me. But the Quran constantly pushes back on this notion. It kind of reminds me of something JFK once said. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. In other words, privilege doesn't confer superiority, but a type of custodianship. So as a Muslim, I believe God has distributed resources and privilege amongst all people. So that means I'm not to be envious of the privilege I may not carry. But whatever privilege I do carry, it's a responsibility. It gives me the role of being a custodian, to offer care to other people from the perspective of my privilege. This same attitude towards privilege is also echoed in the attitude many indigenous tribes have towards land resources. The privilege of land doesn't give you the right to strip it of its resources for your own needs. Instead, the privilege of land confers custodianship, or the judicious use of the resource or privilege to maintain the balance of nature. But sharing your privilege isn't easy. In fact, it's the greatest test of our faith in divine providence. Can those with money and food part with it? It's not that easy sometimes. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, it was much easier to give charity. It was much easier to share our resources because there was plenty. We had access. I remember there was, I think in April, groceries became kind of hard to access. There was a panic, and a lot of us were relying on Instacart. And one day I got a call from a community member saying, I'm out of eggs, and my staple diet, my diet relies heavily on eggs. Do you have eggs? And I remember looking in my fridge, and I had a partial carton of eggs left. And it was the first time in my life that I thought twice about it, because it was the first time, being honest, if I gave my eggs, I wasn't quite sure when I would be able to purchase eggs again. I could have never imagined being in this position. It was very humbling. Sharing those eggs took on a whole different meaning. When we think about our privilege during this moment in the middle of the Black Lives Movement and the fight for racial justice and equity, if I leverage my privilege, if I open my mouth and speak out for those that are being marginalized, will I lose my own standing? Will I compromise my privilege? Will certain people take me a little less seriously? These are real concerns today. For a Muslim, sharing and giving is tied to remembering that whatever gifts and privileges I do have, it's not because I deserve them or that I own them. They're gifts arising from God's providence and nature, and they confer custodianship on me. So as individuals, we need not feel guilty about whatever privilege we hold. Instead, I understand it as being called to share whatever privilege I may carry out of a reverence of the divine nature of every person, out of reverence for the inherent worth and dignity of every human. So first, I need to understand my identity and acknowledge the resulting privilege. I was born and raised in the United States. My parents immigrated from Pakistan. I am a Muslim. I am a woman. I am a dentist. I am a mother. So what privilege do I carry? Well, I will admit I have wealth. And with wealth, the levers of society are easier for me to access. I am saying this out loud because it's important to acknowledge my privilege in the hopes that it'll make it a little bit easier for anyone watching to acknowledge their privilege. And honestly, it's been really surprising to me. There was a time my husband and I couldn't pay for groceries. I remember standing at Walmart and holding my breath when my credit card used to get swiped. And then things changed. We are now able to buy groceries without thinking twice about them. And it's sad, I've realized that the wealthier you are in this country, the easier it is to make wealth. If I'm late on my taxes, it's a slap on the wrist, versus when the poor fall behind, they're cast away. I have education. I have the title doctor in front of my name. That certainly opens doors. People listen. And I'm not Black. And that's important for me to say. I am brown, but I'm not Black. It's a different experience. I don't carry the scars of generations of oppression. My identity was not forcibly stripped from me. I can't imagine not knowing what your great-great-great-grandfather's name was, or who your great-great-grandmother was. I'm able to trace back my ancestry, and I have a deep sense of who I am. My parents were not structurally prevented from climbing the rungs of our society. Simply put, I have a brother. He's brown, but before 9/11, he could walk into a 7-Eleven and not be surveilled. Of course, after 9/11, that has changed, but it's a little taste of what my Black brothers and sisters and community members go through every day. So what are my challenges? I've talked a little bit about my privilege, and I want to share a little bit of what life is like for me. I am from a family of immigrants, and there's funny stories in that. Like, for example, I didn't understand the use of deodorant till I was in college. It's a very embarrassing story, and I'll save it for another time. But there's also real consequences. Like, I remember my dad. He's an engineer, really smart, really hardworking. But I remember him coming home and asking my brother, who was a kid, "Son, can you explain to me how football works? Because that's what the guys talk about at the cooler, and that's where opportunities come up, opportunities for progress. And if I can't speak the lingo, if I don't understand the culture, I'm going to be left behind." There's a language barrier. I recently remember hearing a man say he was really put off by a Muslim woman at his child's school. He said, I tried approaching her to talk to her because our kids are friends, and she didn't want to talk to me. It was so rude. And I remember asking this gentleman when he was sharing the story, "Do you know if she spoke English? Was she comfortable in English?" I know from my own mother, I used to ask her, "Why don't you volunteer in my classroom?" It took a long time before she told me. She said, "When I'm around people that are speaking English very fast, I forget all of my English. I lose every single word. I can't string together a sentence. I felt nervous. and I felt like the other women didn't want to talk to me. I felt alienated and like I wasn't supposed to be there, so I stopped coming. So being an immigrant is a different experience. It's a lack of privilege in a way. I'm a woman, and that impacts me within Muslim spaces and in interfaith and civic spaces. We'd have to be kidding ourselves if we claim that our country is equitable to the genders. Women are still not getting paid as much as men. And I'm not white. And that has caused lots of deep pain. When I was in 5th grade, I remember being alone most of the time. I sat alone on the bench. I was a bench warmer during recess. I didn't have the cultural language and tools that the other kids had. I looked different. I didn't go to church. And I was alone most of the time. And I just wanted to vanish, wanted to be invisible. That was my goal, just to not be seen. But one day, this girl, Amy, sat down next to me. And at first, I was kind of pleased. Somebody's sitting next to me. And I remember the way she looked at me, as if I was filthy and dirty. And she said to me, and I think children watch this, so I'll edit my words. But she looked me up and down and said, you know, your color, your skin, it's the color of poop. Except she didn't use that word. And I remember feeling like I was nothing. I was reduced to being insignificant and non-existent. And it's amazing because even as an adult, every time we're asked that question, where do you come from? It's like the world is telling us, you don't belong here. And that concerns me when it comes to my children. My children are 2nd generation. They've never been to Pakistan. They don't speak a different language. They see themselves as American. And yet when people look at them, they don't see them as American. We really have to start to think about this. What does it mean to be American? Does it really mean white skin? Thirdly, I'm a Muslim. And the truth is, there are times where I hide my Muslimness. We recently put our house on sale. The realtor and I quickly realized that we need to remove any evidence that I'm a Muslim because it might compromise somebody's willingness to buy my house. If I was a Christian, I might not have felt that same compulsion to hide who I am. But as it was mentioned, I used to be a dentist and I no longer practice dentistry. Why? And it has to do with this identity issue. When my son was 5 years old, we were on a cruise. And the cruise was doing this program called, it was a comedy thing they did every night. Kids say the darndest things. And my son was like, I want to be on there. I hope they pick me. And so on the 2nd day of the cruise, he cut our dinner short, scrambled all the way up, sat in the very first row, had his hand up really high, pick me, pick me, pick me. So he gets picked. And the comedian, he was trying to be funny. And so he asks my son, what's your name? And my son says, Musa. And the comedian says, what? And my son says, Musa. He's only 5. His legs don't touch the ground. He's kicking his legs. He's smiling, grinning ear to ear, so proud of himself to be up there. The man asks him 3 or 4 times, what's your name? He just keeps repeating that. My son's getting the feeling that something's up. Finally, the comedian says, what the hell kind of a name is that? And my son looks up at the audience, 5 years old, and he says, well, if you skip the M, my name is USA. And the whole crowd starts cheering, M-U-S-A, M-U-S-A. And the comedian looks at my son, looks at the audience and says, and would you look at that, with one letter, he went from being a terrorist to a patriot. I sat there in the audience. Everyone was laughing. I felt like I had to laugh. Should I laugh? Should I not laugh? Am I being uptight? My child is up there. I was paralyzed. I was frozen. I did nothing. The questions continued along that similar line. And you know what? I never did anything about it. I didn't feel like I had the agency to do so. Later on, I shared the story with a friend who is white. And she said to me, if that had been my kid, I would have stood up. And believe me, I spent a lot of time feeling really rotten about myself that I let my son sit up there and I didn't protect him. I did nothing. And that's when I decided it was time that I take matters into my own hand. I wasn't going to sit anymore. So I gave up the practice of dentistry to spend time with my kids and also to better understand my identity and leverage whatever privilege I did have for my community members. So I began serving within the Muslim community, and in that space, I try to advocate for the less privileged, which is women. Outside of the Muslim community, I try to advocate for the less privileged, which is Muslims and people of color. And I've realized some things. As was mentioned, I'm president of the South Coast Interfaith Council this year, and I'm so grateful for interfaith spaces. In religious spaces, like within the mosque or church, questions are answered from the framework, what does the text say? It can be very closed box and limiting. In political spaces, questions are answered from the framework, what will keep us in power? How do we gain more votes? The interfaith space has been particularly powerful because it's a space where people come together to wonder and to connect. It's from this shared space of wonder and the desire to connect that the interfaith community attempts to address society's questions and challenges. There's a shared curiosity to understand the divine and one another, which is deeply moving. It's not always easy. I know we're feeling a lot of things today. I'm anxious too. So I'm going to share in closing a passage from the Quran that brings me strength and hope. By the declining day, truly humankind is in a loss, except for those who believe, perform righteous deeds, and exhort one another to truth and braveness. I invite you all to be brave, understand who you are, your identity and your privilege, and then try to know other people meaningfully. When you're able to see issues from a plurality of perspectives, we may finally be able to ascertain what the truth may be, and that's where we'll find our solutions. If we're constantly worried about what other people have said or what they may see, you may not be able to hear the guidance that comes from within you, blown of God's Spirit. If you're constantly worried about compromising your privilege by speaking out or acting out for the less privileged, then you're letting fear muffle your voice. But if you can be steadfast in seeking truth while holding yourself accountable only to the divine spirit, which we all carry, if you can be steadfast in loving and the divine in every person, this is where we'll find wholeness as a society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. Our community acknowledges and honors the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It also acknowledges the inherent worth and dignity of our earth and our animals, which leads me to, why did the UU cross the road? You know, Reverend Steve made me do this. Why did the UU cross the road? To support the chicken seemingly on its own search for truth and meaning. Please give generously.
Comfort me, oh my soul. Abraham and Sarah, thank you both so much. Please remember that this church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences and beneath all of our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent unity we witness the unity.
May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide within you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom. Salam. Namaste. Blessed be. And now our service truly begins.